So thanks for joining us today. I'm going to tempt fate and do two technical demos for you today. The first one is we're going to crack a passcode on an iOS device using open source software. And then the second is I'm going to be releasing a tool after the conference for automating the forensic stuff that I'm talking to you guys about today. So you'll be able to automate acquisition of all the tasty stuff that we're going to look at. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I like to get the pin cracking demo going first because the pin on this is 9371. I've cracked it many times and it takes about 28 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy rolling and we'll come back to it later. So let me just go ahead and fire it up real quick. I could have turned that off before we got started. So has anybody used the iPhone Data Protection Toolkit or any of the solutions out there for cracking passcodes? Okay. All right, so essentially what we're going to do here is this is a jailbreakable device. It's in an iPhone 4. The trick to using this toolkit is the full feature set only works on iOS 5. 5.1.1 is what I've got running on here. iOS 6, iOS 7, this stuff doesn't really work. There's some limited functionality on iOS 6, so you can't crack passcodes, but once you load the toolkit on the actual device, you can use it to crack the keychain and a few other things if you have some intimate knowledge of the device. So we're going to kick off Red Snow. And all I'm doing here is just loading a custom RAM disk. And I'll explain this in a minute. I have a supplementary slide deck to go with it. So this is going to be a little bit different than the ones that I've done in the past. Normally I like to do the crack from my actual host machine because it's got some sexier output so you can actually see where you are in the realm of things, what the status is. I just loaded a new Python environment this week which completely screwed up my stuff. So I'm going to have to crack it on the actual device. So I don't know what it's going to look like after we crack because I've never done it on the device itself. But I do have a screenshot of what it looks like when you do it that way. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to forward my ports. And then I'm going to open up an SSH connection here. Default password is Alpine when you root a device. I didn't see any point in changing that for a test device that nobody has access to. So there you go. The crack is in progress now. So it's going to iterate through. It's going to basically try every combination, and eventually we will crack the passcode. All right, so basically this is what we're doing. So step one, we're going to create our own RAM disk, and this is very well documented. They have a wiki, the iPhone Data Protection Toolkit wiki, so you can go out. You can still get an iPhone 4 with iOS 5 off of eBay. Probably Craigslist as well, so if you guys want to add one of these to your lab for this kind of fun, then you still can. Step two, establish a connection to the phone, SSH over USB. I do have the device tethered up here, as you probably noticed. And then step three, brute force the passcode. This is typically done on my Mac, but again, we're actually going to crack it on the device itself since my Python environment is completely buggered up. This is actually what it looks like when you crack it on the Mac. So you can see the iterations here. We'll actually have an ETA, which isn't very accurate, but it does give you the total amount of time to crack. And then you can see 9371, we successfully cracked that. And if you look down here, we've got the keychain database. So we can use keychain_tool.py to obtain the secrets. And now we own this device and all of the data on it. The crypto is broken. So passcode length, the moral of the story is 4-digit simple passcodes are ridiculously insecure. You might as well not have one at all, right? I mean, I've known security people that have 11111234 as their passcodes because I've picked up their phone and put it in, and then I had access. So 18 minutes is a pretty good time to crack 4. It goes up to 19 days. You can see it exponentially increases. And these are, with the complexity of the pins. So obviously, alphanumeric and alphanumeric complex, that's really where you want to be if you actually want to take advantage of the software-based encryption that are on these devices. So the iPhone Data Protection Toolkit, some info here. And by the way, both of these decks are available. The conference guys have it, so it'll be available for you. So there's the skinny on that. I'm not going to really go through it. There's a number of Zdarsky's tools. I actually got interested in this stuff around late 2009, early 2010 after I read some of Jonathan's papers and his book on iPhone forensics. And the reason that I created, I'll get to that in a minute. So there is a commercial toolkit that you can get. It's like $1,500 for a single user license. And it actually works pretty good. It can crack simple passcodes. And it's a pretty cool toolkit. We use this for actual assessments where we're having to use, where we're doing risk assessments against devices that are greater than iOS 5, which is virtually everybody. And then this is just a little study I snagged off the internet. There was 10,000 combinations of 4-digit pins using 0 through 9, blah, blah, blah. So basically, these were the top 20 4-digit passcodes that were used in the study. Pretty interesting stuff. Now, while that's cracking, we're going to go ahead and start looking at offensive mobile forensics. The reason I created this methodology about 4 years ago now is because at the time, I was getting into mobile application security assessments, and I noticed when I started reading the papers and the books and the other things that were coming out, there were not a lot of people doing mobile application assessments 4 years ago. Virtually everybody and their brother is doing it now, but 4 years ago, they weren't. And if you look at all the papers and all the how-tos on how to perform an application security assessment, they all told you to use the simulator. I have a major issue with that because you can't examine personal data leakage on a simulator. And the difference between mobile application security and web application security is generally that you potentially have physical access to the device that you're attempting to compromise. Okay, this is not something that web application developers have to deal with. So the OWASP top 10 was no longer sufficient, although you will find the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities in mobile applications. Cross-site scripting, SQL injection is pretty rampant, session management flaws are very, very common, etc. So, real quick introduction for me. I've been doing the mobile stuff for about 4 years now. I've been doing AppSec stuff for over 10, been InfoSec for over 15 years. Offensive mobile forensics is the reason I created it, number one, because I wanted to make sure that people understood it's important when you perform a mobile application security assessment that you must look at data leakage on the device. And we're going to look at why. We're going to see lots of examples. We saw a great talk from Abdullah and Jack yesterday where they were kind of outing a bunch of dating apps that were not treating your private and sensitive information accordingly. And there's actually apps, the devices themselves don't do a terrific job of protecting your privacy either, and we're going to look at that too. So I've got some findings from mobile apps and findings from native apps on the devices themselves, and I will cover both iOS and Android. So again, I usually can talk for 75, 90 minutes on this. I'm going to talk really fast and I'm going to skip a bunch. So if you'd like to pick my brain afterward, then I welcome that. So Google Stats, this is kind of pointless now, but originally I'd put this stuff in here to illustrate that smartphones are not a trend. This is basically where we're headed now, and we all know that, so I'm not going to insult your intelligence. More stats. Tools. Anybody do forensics in here? Cool. So these will look familiar to you then. We've got some Encase, we've got some Cellebrite, we have the Tableau Write Blocker up here. That's all chain of custody stuff. I've had many opportunities to get into quote-unquote legitimate forensics, and it's not interesting to me because chain of custody is a pain in the ass. So if you came here to learn about these tools and how you use them against mobile devices, you're in the wrong place because we're not going to talk about them. What we are going to talk about are hacker tools and techniques for performing forensics against mobile devices. Generally, the #1 threat to these devices and to BYOD is loss or theft of the device. So physical access. So we've got a lot of different tools here. Obviously, jailbreaking tools for iOS. You know, after doing hundreds and hundreds of assessments, both on my own and professionally for clients, I really got tired of the command line stuff. I'm a Linux guy at heart, Mac now, and I love the command line, but SQL-Lite, you know, queries and stuff like that, hundreds and hundreds of times it gets old. So I looked for a smarter way, and I like to use our browser for acquisition. Now I've written a tool to perform the acquisition, so I don't necessarily need the GUI anymore. The trick is get the stuff off the device and onto your host machine, because you can perform analysis much quicker and you have access to much better tools on your host machine than you do on the mobile device. So our browser is a nice SFTP GUI. I like Razor SQL and Base for SQL-like client. I like these for a couple of different reasons. I've pretty much gone to just using Base now. Base didn't used to have support for blobs, and since iOS 6, Apple has been storing virtually everything, and now the apps that are written for iOS 6 and above store a lot of interesting stuff as blobs, not necessarily as something, a clear text string that's easy to get to. You can still read the blobs, but these clients did a terrible job with that, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to see it. So Base actually has great support for blobs now, and there's various other tools here. This is the only one that I really want to call your attention to. PhoneView is like a $20 or $30 tool. You can go download that and plug in your phone, and you can look at all of your applications. So Jack and Abdullah were talking about another app yesterday that I'm not familiar with that you can do that with. But this thing will enable you to go perform an analysis of an application before you actually decide to use it and start putting your personal information into it to make sure that they're going to treat your data appropriately. So these are some screenshots of some of the tools that we use on iOS. Red Snow, obviously we need to do jailbreaking. Tiny Umbrella is useless now. We used to use that to save our blobs so that we could actually regress or downgrade to an older version. And you would have to do this because what happens is Apple stops signing the firmware, and then you can no longer load it on your device. This is now completely broken, and you can't downgrade anymore at all. There are some caveats and exceptions to that, but as a general rule, you can't downgrade anymore. So I hate snow. I was going to retire this thing a lot earlier because I was like, well, we're done with jailbreaking because 7.1 never got jailbroken. Now it's been jailbroken, but they haven't released the exploit. And if you didn't see the news yesterday, iOS 8 beta is jailbroken, untethered. Stefan jailbroke it. So I'm really excited about that. WinOCM and I Hate Snow actually found a boot ROM exploit. So those guys claim that they can now jailbreak any device for life, but they refuse to share it with anybody, including the jailbreak community at large. Now WinOCM actually got a job with Apple, so he's pretty much done with jailbreaking anyway. iPhone Explorer, this was when I was looking for tools where I could actually perform an assessment without having to get into all the nitty-gritty. It's really buggy. It's a piece of shit. I don't really recommend it. PhoneView, however, is a great application, and it was 20 bucks. I think it's gone up to like $29 or $30 now. And as you can see, it's useful for a lot of other reasons. If you want to archive your messages and call logs and various other things off your device, you can do that. Sorry for the video guy. I do move a lot. So I'm glad you got your snack done. This is our browser right here. So this is actually the host, or this is the target machine that I'm pulling stuff over to. Here's my host machine, and this is you know, a really cool way to do it. I've done this for years, and then I decided, you know what, it'd be really cool to automate this. So I've got a tool now for that, and I'm going to be writing one for Android as well. But I decided to start with iOS because it's my favorite playground. Tools on Android, pretty much the same stuff. We're doing a lot of the same techniques. It's a lot of the same tools. With a few differences, obviously. So depending on what platform you're working with, I used to use Samsung devices exclusively for Android. I've got some Knox research at the end of this. I now hate Samsung because of Knox. They've made it very difficult for us to modify our devices, particularly if we have to go to work and then hook it up to presumably a Knox EMM solution, Enterprise Mobility Management Solution, because it will, essentially what happens is if you load anything other than the signed firmware, custom ROM or something like that, and if you don't do it right, if you root it, there's an eFuse in there, and when you trip the eFuse, that device is dead as far as Knox is concerned. So you can still use the device for personal use, but in the event that your employer decided to roll Knox out in your environment, you're screwed because your device can't participate in that ecosystem. So I'm done with Samsung. I'm using HTC now. I have the M8, really sexy device. It's cool stuff. So tools on Android. One of the biggest difference about Android is that they make a ton of diagnostic tools available to us that can absolutely destroy a developer's day. I found that most Android developers don't bother to suppress any kind of output, and so you'll see lots of interesting things. This is a nifty one here, dumpsys. You can pass different parameters to dumpsys and look for various interesting things that are on the device. I happen to pass a count to it, and I'm looking at the accounts that were on the device. You can see that at one time I was hooked up to Exchange over ActiveSync, and you're going to see when we look at some of the forensics stuff that this is only the tip of the iceberg as far as data leakage on Android is concerned. Android is still not ready for the enterprise as far as I'm concerned. Still way too much data leakage on there, and there's not enough, there's no MDM API yet, although hopefully with Divide being acquired or slurped into Google, that will change for us. So Google Nexus, my favorite device right now, Google Nexus. I'm playing with the HTC 2. Not really ready to get rid of my Nexus yet, but the Nexus, as you can see, there's a ton of cool tools out there that you can get from XDA that make rooting and managing the ROMs and the other things on your Android devices very, very easy. So I'm really loving the Google Nexus right now. Obviously, we can use ADB to gain remote access to our device. We don't have to SSH in like we do on an iOS device. But I've had that come back and bite me a few times where maybe my cable got corrupt or I had some issue where I wasn't able to get to the device over ADB. So I always install Quick SSHD just as a backdoor so that I'll have a way to get back in there real quick if something happens. QTADB, if this is not in your toolkit and you're doing Android research, playing with rooted devices, shame on you. This is a really cool tool. Probably the thing that I like most about it is this right here, screenshot. Anybody ever tried to take a screenshot on Android? Kind of a pain. You've got to use a couple of different tools in the platform tools SDK, and it's a real pain in the butt. This simplifies it. You literally just hit the screenshot, you refresh, and you can take as many screenshots as you like. There's also a tool that just came out. I haven't actually played with it yet. It's called Barbecue. You can actually, it's kind of like AirPlay for iOS devices where you can beam your screen to an HD TV, presentation device, stuff like that. So you can check that out as well. Other tools that I use on Android, root checker. Obviously, we need to verify that we have root. This is my HTTP proxy in the event that I need a local proxy. Usually I use Burp, like what Abdullah and Jack were talking about yesterday. You're going to need some kind of custom recovery. I like the Team Win recovery project now, TWRP. I used to use Clockwork, but not anymore. And then you're obviously going to need a file system tool as well, so you can move some stuff around. So let's look at some data. I've already done the hard part for you guys. Since iOS 4, I've cataloged all of the physical locations for the interesting data that's on these devices. There's tons and tons of data on here. Not all of it is interesting in the realm of attempting to steal an identity or attack a person of interest. So I've gone through and actually tracked all this stuff for you. In the tool, I'm using static input files that have all of this, and I've commented the input files so that you know exactly what it is it's coming over. But you have this is available as well as a visual reference when you download the deck. So again, this is all of them. You'll see these things change. Locations change. Capitalization changes. You can see that there's lots of different developers that are playing with this stuff. So you have to do a little diligence based on the version of iOS that you're looking at. If you're looking at my 4.3 slot up here and you can't find something and you're looking at a 7.0.6 machine, well, the reason why is because it's probably moved. So you need to go back and look at the newer information. All right, let's look at some findings. The keyboard cache, otherwise known as Apple's native keylogging facility. This thing is supposed to make typing much easier for you using autocorrect. I'm sure we've all typed shot or wanted to type shit and it typed shot many, many times. I hate that. I don't know how many times I've typed shit, probably 1,000, and it still changes it to shot. I don't know what's up with that. This thing, unless you purge it manually, this thing will continue to build and build and build. So I've been using this device for just shy of 2 years. I've never reset my keyboard cache. I have approximately 19 months of keylogging data on my phone. This is actually my daily driver, so I use it all the time. So this is some stuff that I pulled out. I was doing a risk assessment for a client, and you can see that you can put together complete sentences from the keyboard cache. So Amit will coordinate that through help desk, just need to make sure. So imagine you're Anthony Weiner and maybe you're texting with somebody because everything that you're typing into, unless it's marked as secure and it's a masked data field, is going to get cached in here. Some other stuff, snapshots. So there's a cool effect when you hit the home key on an iOS device, it kind of like that. The way that it does that is it takes a screenshot of the open application. Okay, so potentially data leakage there. Some interesting things. So here's my calendar. Here's my recent calls. Let's see, here's some American Express charges, and here's some text messages with my girlfriend. Yeah, thankfully those were clean. Let's see, what are we looking at? Expense management. So some applications are pretty bad, as we saw in Jack and Abdullah's talk yesterday. This is from an application called JotNot Pro, and it's an expense management application for road warriors, people that travel all the time. And so one of my buddies turned me on to this app. He's like, hey, this is pretty cool, check it out. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't use any apps that I don't analyze first, so I'll download them, do a full analysis, then determine if I actually want to work with them. Sometimes I send hate mail to the developer and say, what the fuck are you doing? Sometimes they appreciate it, sometimes they don't. I don't really care either way because I'm going to speak with my wallet and I'm not going to pay for that app if it sucks. So this one definitely sucks. You can see that they support multiple APIs. Here's my Evernote creds in the clear. Here's my Google creds in the clear. That is my actual personal Google creds, so that's why it's fully redacted. Some other stuff, chat and social applications, instant messaging applications, security, absolutely terrible. These were 2 apps that they actually fixed the issues after I reported them to them. So this is the AIM instant messaging client. You can see username, password, clear text. plist files, if you don't know, on iOS are basically a configuration file. We use XML on Android devices. This is another social app. This is called Drink Wine. It's so that you can socially say, hey, Ray, check out this new Merlot that I got. You know, it's pretty cool. And you can tweet about it. So I can tweet, so I don't actually have to contact Ray. I can just tweet about it. And there's my Twitter username and password stored in the clear in the configuration file. Most commonly, if you're doing mobile application assessments, you'll find interesting stuff in the plist files or the XML files on Android or in the SQLite databases. Once again, if you saw Jack and Abdullah yesterday, they talked about that. Another chat social app. I don't remember what this one was, but I thought this was an interesting finding because this is binary string. So they thought they were going to be clever and just embed encode the chat messages as binary. We can just run that against strings, and it's going to pop everything out. There's some sensitive information there, so I blocked that out. This one right here, bjive, is an interesting one. I was delivering a talk similar to this one, and a customer came up to me afterward, and he goes, hey, we're getting ready to approve bjive IM enterprise-wide in an organization with 150,000 users. Have you ever looked at that application? And I said, no. And he goes, well, if you do, would you mind letting me know if you have any problems with it? And I go, yeah, sure. And I was just going to blow it off because I was really busy at the time, but curiosity killed the cat, and I said, you know what, let me just go get this thing. So I did. These guys actually store all your chats in an SQLite database. Nice. What do we have? Contacts. So all of your contacts, yeah, they're all stored in the clear, along with images too. So there's a separate database for address book images. I don't know if you guys put pictures of your contacts next to them, so that shows up as well. Here's mail on iOS. This is not nearly as bad as Android. You're going to shit when you see the Android findings. So I can see all of my Exchange mailboxes, my Gmail mailboxes, and right here I can see messages. So that is going to be the messages. And obviously they just fixed an issue with email attachments not being encrypted since apparently iOS 7. which I kind of laughed at that because they're not really encrypted anyway. They never really have been, unless you put a pin on the device. So that's pretty interesting. And MoMail, so this is iCloud. I turned on all the iCloud syncing stuff, and some interesting things happened to my machine. All of a sudden, some new directories showed up: mobile email, mobile Safari, mobile notes. So all my stuff that I'm syncing to iCloud is first cached in the clear on my device. And you can see this is some mail, and this is exactly how it's stored on the device. So this is the stuff that showed up. If you look under user library mail, all of these, so here's my Exchange Active Sync, so this is all of my synchronization stuff. Your primary mailbox is going to be envelope index. Don't be fooled by protected index. It's not protected. You can open it up in base and have a look at that information as well. And then this was the thing that really scared me. When I turned on that stuff, I'm like, holy cow. So this is what happens when you use Google as a corporate email solution. So it's IMAP, and what it's doing is caching all of my folders from the servers. And does anybody see anything that would be interesting in here? So let's say you're a competitor of mine. Customers, that would probably be an interesting one. Recruiting, interesting. Research. Yeah, so I was a little bit shocked, and I'm not using the iCloud stuff anymore. SQLite. Nope. SQLite in the clear. SQL Cipher, by the way, guys, there's no reason to have clear text data in SQLite. SQL Cipher's been around since 2002. It's really fast, it's really light, no footprint hardly at all because it was created for embedded systems. So there's absolutely no reason for this. Particularly, there's no reason for Apple to be doing this or Google to be storing this crap in the clear. Okay, so I've got a little demo here. There's also a voicemail database on here. There's 2 databases dedicated to voicemails.
Peloquin. This is Natasha with American General. Now, I was calling in regards to your account. Looking at it, it looks like we could possibly do some cash out. Is that something that you would possibly be interested in? Basically, what I would do is update your information to send up for review. Give me a call back. We could look at.
Yeah. So that was a trust fund. I was getting a trust fund set up, and I was cashing some stuff out of one account into another. All the voicemails that I've ever received on this device are still on the device. You know, when you go in there and you hit delete, you delete them, you're not deleting them. You're deleting them from the UI because the UI has a limit. They're actually still on the device. And you can recover them and play them with QuickTime. This is iOS still. Nope. Yeah, well, again, I've had mine for over 2 years. I miss a lot of calls. They're all there. You can see the date and timestamps from when they first showed up. So here's the voicemail database. It is very useful and lets you know who the sender was and who the caller was and all that good stuff as well. And then this is what their AMR files. This is what the voicemails actually look like. Network config. So this network identification.plist, this tracks every single network I've ever connected to with the device. And this is Wi-Fi. This is every single Wi-Fi network I've ever connected to. This is not too bad. Obviously, there's some data leakage here. And, you know, take it on its own, not too big a deal. You take some of this information where you can get some internal IP addresses and some other things if you're trying to crack the inside of an organization. It can be helpful. Wait until you see what they do with Android. It's really fun. Keychain. So this is actually an old keychain. This is the new keychain. This is very much improved from the old keychain. The old keychain had a ton of clear text strings in it that you could pull out with strings. Passbook. So does anybody use Passbook for your plane tickets, train tickets, stuff like that? Well, just in case you're interested, this is the cloud application that stores your stuff. And there is a passes23.sqlite database that stores your flight information or your hotel or whatever. All in clear text, guys. The only thing that protects this information is your passcode. Your 4-digit, easily cracked passcode, that's right. So Ubiquity, I like to use Siri for creating reminders. So I'll be driving down the road and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do that. So I'll pick up the phone and I'll hit Siri and I'll say, Siri, set a reminder, blah, blah, blah. So there's one of my reminders, call the lawn service. All of those are stored as well. So let's look at some Android stuff. Same thing here. I've already gone through, done the hard work, and found all the interesting stuff for you. Okay? And this will be built into the tool as well. The Android version of the tool that'll come out later. So here's all the accounts on the device. This is pretty interesting sometimes. I mean, we would expect to find a Gmail account on here. This is bookmarks, so this is all the bookmarks for your browser. Hopefully you're not bookmarking your porn and then loaning your device to your wife. Browser data. This is something that's pretty scary, and I haven't, I don't use this to use basic authentication in other applications, but you can see some of the things that you can save. Form data, and it depends on how your browser's configured, right? Are you saving information? Are you using autocomplete? Things like that. Depending on what your configuration looks like, you could potentially be storing your HTTP authentication, cred, and password. Thank you. Form data, form URLs, cookies, pretty much you name it. But again, it depends on how your browser is configured on your device. So you have control over that. Cache. Mail creds. Okay, now this is fun. Who's using Android in the enterprise environment? Are you reading your corporate mail on that? Well, this would be my Exchange account with my password in the clear. And then here's my test Gmail account, password in the clear. Every account that you have is stored in this table, and it's stored in clear text. By the way, this is up to date. 4.4 is still doing this. In other words, Google is not using their own keychain that they implemented 4 revisions ago. And it's really easy to find this information. I don't have to go get the email provider DB to get this information. I can go onto the device, I can run strings against the DB, and I just happen to know what this information was, so I grepped for it, so we wouldn't have to go through a bunch of crap to see it. But I'm just running strings against the database, and here is my corporate credentials and my Gmail credentials. Yes, sir? It's Android, brother. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder with some of the research that Blue Box, Jeff Forstall over there is doing, I'm beginning to wonder there's not really anything you can't hack on Android. That's why I highly recommend not using it in the enterprise. Which pains me because I like Android. I really do. I mean, I've always had Android devices. I even bought a Honeycomb device. Anybody buy a Honeycomb device? I haven't even turned it on in like 3 years, but I bought one. Here's all your mail, so your emails are in there too. I don't just have your creds, I can go ahead and read all your mail too. Yeah, that's the default email client. Obviously, if you're using Touchdown, it's a lot better, and it doesn't use this stuff. They have their own protected indexes for their mail. So if you are going to use Android in the enterprise environment, definitely use Touchdown as a client. Okay, here's my other favorite finding for Android, WPA_supplement.conf. Every Wi-Fi network that you've connected to, stored in clear text. If you use PSK, if you use a pre-shared key, the key is stored in clear text in this file, right there. I don't know why I redacted it. I put the same password on purpose for each. Ooh, actually that one is not. I thought those were all test networks, but they're not. This is an application that I did an assessment for on Android. We've got email data leakage a couple of times over. We've got, email leakage all over the place. This is the same application. This is what I wanted to show you. In the app, you can set your home location, and they store your GPS coordinates for your home location. This was the other interesting finding during this assessment. This guy works at the company. I downloaded this app from Play. So he hard-coded his own username into the config file for the app. And by the way, they didn't have a lockout, so I was able to brute force his account. So what do we do now? Well, don't lose your phone. Thanks for coming out. No, I'm playing. It's okay. I'm scared too. That's why I analyze all the applications that I use on these devices. Number of things that we can do, it depends on who you are. If you're a user, then pay attention to the permissions that are being requested of you when you install an application. Go by phone view. and do analysis of the applications yourself and say no to applications that are not treating your data appropriately. Inside the enterprise, mobile security policy, from a management perspective, from an administration perspective, we have to have a really good acceptable use policy. I hate it when people just shove security awareness down people's throats, but they don't educate them as to why the policies are what they are, okay? If I have a policy against jailbroken and rooted devices, I have a responsibility as the knowledgeable individual to explain to you why jailbreaking is a threat to our enterprise. Obviously, we can see why, right? But for the unknown or the uneducated, they don't know. So mobile security education. You need some kind of management, whether it's mobile application management is really the way to go. Device management, I could give a damn what you do with your device. If you have corporate data on your device, then I'm going to protect that, okay? And there's solutions out there now where you can put pins on specific applications. You can do per application VPN tunnels. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff. So there's no excuse for us to not at least have some sort of defense for our devices. Offensive mobile forensics, use this methodology. Go get some tools for your lab and start doing some real risk assessments on the stuff that you're doing inside. And for God's sake, if you're developing mobile applications, don't be a dick. Treat people's information the way that you want your information treated. It is absolutely pathetic, some of the applications that are out there and what they're doing with our data. So Samsung Knox, I told you guys that I hate it now. I looked at it, so this thing is still not done cracking. Hang on, let me check this out real quick. Oh, it is. There we go. So, passcode 9371, keybag version 3, keybag keys. There's 10 keys in here. And we have some additional tools on board where we can use these keys and go extract all the encrypted stuff out of the keybag. I actually completed a mobile application assessment recently where I was like, okay, you guys aren't using the keychain for auth. Where the hell is your stuff being stored? Turned out they were storing their PIN, which turned out to be the encryption key as well. They were using PhoneGap. And in local storage, they were storing all the parameters for their crypto library, which I found out was SJCL, because I just took all the parameters, plugged them into Google, and SJCL came up, along with a demo page where I could decrypt their stuff. I was like, hey, that's awesome. All I need is the key. So I started running a tool called filemon.ios, which real-time watched file I/O real-time on an iOS device, and I found out that they were writing their key to the default keybag. So in this case, I was able to get their secrets still because they hadn't limited the version of iOS that the application could run on. So I was able to put it on my iOS 5 device that, as you have seen, I can crack. So I was able to crack their stuff too. So the way that they mitigated that is I told them you need to require iOS 6 or above. Now I can't get into the keybag and get your keys. And quit using local storage, for crying out loud. Anyways, so that was successful. Now let's look at automating this. All right, so where is it? Okay, so here's the script. Now I'm going to assume that you guys have not changed the password from Alpine. Thank you, sir. Yep, we're doing good. So this is set up to default to Alpine, but I've set it up with parameters, command line parameters. So if you've been smart and changed it from Alpine to something more secure and that the entire world doesn't know, then you can put that in at the command line. It'll also take an IP address of the device as a parameter on the command line as well. All right? So for now, we're using a static input file. I was late to the conference today because I've been trying all week and I've been busy, distractions, and I wanted to spend as much time here as I could. I've been trying to do some dynamic stuff where I don't use an input file at all. I basically let you go tell me what you want to get. And it's a lot more useful that way for mobile application assessments because this is really kind of set up for a full device risk assessment at this point because I'm pulling all of the interesting data off the device. And what I'm doing is I'm actually going to build it. I'll show you here. So in this directory, sorry about that. In this directory right here, there's going to be an output folder that gets created. And what I'm going to do is, as I pull the information off the iPad, I'm going to rebuild the file structure exactly the way it is on the iPad. So that way, when you go back to your Mac and you do your analysis, you're looking at the exact same file system, essentially, that you were looking at on the iPad. Okay? So let's run it. We're 1 for 1. Fuck you, demo gods. All right. Now, if this whole thing runs, I ran it right before I came over here, and oh, it would help if the iPad was actually connected. Make sure I'm connected. Okay. So this is going to take quite a while. I think it took like 20 or 30 minutes to actually pull everything down, but it'll pull enough stuff down that you can see what the result is. Yeah, there we go. So I also have a couple of bugs in here. The reason I'm not releasing it today is I've been chasing bugs. I actually released this to my team earlier in the week, and they've been beating the hell out of it. And there's a number of bugs in here. One of my issues is that when I write the directory the first time, I'm not doing a satisfactory enough check. And what's happening is when I have multiple files, in a lot of cases there's going to be multiple files in a directory that I want to pull over because they're all interesting. What's happening is the program is saying, oh, hey, the directory already exists on the Mac, so you must have gotten everything. So it's throwing an exception there, so I'll have to fix that. So if you guys watch my Twitter, it's at JD Peloquin. I will tweet next week when I release it, and it'll be available on GitHub. So let's go look at some of the output. So you can see var, mobile, library. So this is symlink to /users on an iOS device. And there we go. So here's accounts, and here's the account SQLite database. We can go have a look at that if you want. All right, so well, that's interesting. Should be populated with data. There's only one account in there. By the way, you can do almost everything you can do with base with strings. And by the way, if you will encounter encrypted databases, people that did it right. But anything, thank you, sir, anything that's been deleted in there is actually not really deleted. So you can recover deleted information out of a database using strings. Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's a guy back there that does forensics too, so it's the same situation. You do forensics on a PC, you can recover deleted information all day long. Interesting. I don't know where all the accounts went. Let's look at address book. Stuff might be getting corrupted. Ah, there we go. So, questions? Well, you're running in the context of root. So pretty much all bets are off. If you are going to roll, I mean, there's nothing wrong with jailbreaking as long as you do it responsibly or you handle your devices responsibly afterward. I strongly recommend a firewall. There's a couple of really good ones on Cydia. And you just have to be diligent. Change your root password early and often. Run a firewall. And obviously use a very strong passcode on the device. But yeah, you know, my biggest beef with jailbreaking is in the realm of parental control. There's a lot of parental control software solutions out there. They all require you to jailbreak your child's device, which is beyond stupid in my opinion. You're attempting to protect those children from threats, and you're simply opening them up to a whole new realm of threats by jailbreaking the device. So I think that's ridiculous. Well, guys, thanks very much for coming out. I think I'm out of time. I hope you enjoyed the talk and learned something today. Watch Twitter next week for the tool.